So I chose human papillomavirus vaccine as my topic because I wanted to start brush from the beginning and then go into more advanced therapeutic vaccines. So that's why I chose to start with a prophylactic vaccine first, just to go through the things that we already know. Okay, so if we go on to the next slide, this is the introduction. Are you able to see it?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, so basically what HPV vaccine is that it's a protective instrument against human papillomavirus infections. So what they can do is that they spread usually by sexual contact. So from these two HPV types, they can cause genital warts, and certain more HPV types can cause oropharyngeal cancer, vaginal cancer, anal cancer, and cervical cancer. So, what these vaccines are indicated to prevent diseases and cancers which are known both low risk and high risk from the HPV, which are usually the types given like 6, 11, 16, 18, 31, 33, 45, 52, 58, and so on. So HPV is the number one viral infection currently, which is spreading very rapidly is transmitted through sexual contact. So it can basically cause precancerous lesions, malignant, even if not treated or vaccinated, it can even cause into cancerous lesions and malignant diseases. So for the HP vaccines, the mostly widely used vaccines are three types. The first being the bivalent vaccine, which is also known by its generic name called Cervarix. The second being the quadrivalent vaccine, which is known as Gardasil. The nine-valent vaccine, which is known as Gardasil 9. So the Gardasil 9 is the mostly used in the US. So this is what I shared, that is just how and what is the minimum requirement, like when to get the vaccination for this. So the 9-valent HPV is routinely recommended to both males and females starting from the age of 9 to 45. So the reason that we give this is that so that it can reduce the chances of developing some certain infections which may be from HPV. So anal or oropharyngeal, cervical, vulvar, vaginal, and other head and neck cancers can be caused by HPV. Again, genital warts can be caused by HPV, specifically type 6 and 11, cervical adenocarcinoma, anal, cervical, vaginal intraepithelial neoplasia. These are caused by HPV 16, 18, 31, 32, 45, 52, and 58. So if we go on to the next slide, this is basically a recommendation on who should get it and when should they get the vaccination. So a routine vaccination is a recommendation for both males and females starting from the age of 9 to 45 who've been not previously vaccinated. So it usually goes with the 3-dose regimen and given as recommended in a specific interval. In bisexual men who have intercourse with men from the age of 26, for those patients who are immunocompromised state, who have not been able to have the exposure vaccination, they also get the 3-dose regimen, and victims of assault. So if we go on to the next slide, this is again just in a detailed view on from like what age should be the vaccine should be given, when we should be vaccinated, and the dose amounts for every specific age group. So again, for children and adults ranging from 9 to 26 years, it's again a 3-dose regimen, which is given as recommended. For adults ages from 27 to 45, it's not FDA approved that the vaccine is going to be more as effective as it was in childhood, but this is something that you can discuss with the clinician to see if you're recommended to get, if you can get vaccinated for HPV in that moment, or if your immune system requires that. People who are persons who are pregnant, again in pregnancy, this was a little unclear on my part, because as papers I was reading, some papers stated that it was not effective for pregnant patients. It would result in certain side effects in some study trials, but in some papers I read that it didn't do any effect and it could be given in pregnancy. So I wasn't a little sure on that part for the pregnancy. So if we go on to the next slide, it's administration, how the route of how we give the vaccine. So it's intramuscular IM injection, again in the deltoid region, or it can be given in the anterolateral thigh area. So a single dose is given for both adults and children, which consists of a 0.5 ml suspension. If you go on to the next slide, this is the mechanism of action. It's basically just explaining how the vaccine works once it's given into the body. So the main protective action of this vaccine is to protect against the viral infection HPV. So by doing that, it stimulates antibodies that have a memory term that in future, if a person were to get HPV, it would recognize that and keep it in memory and prevent it from infecting cells. So what it does is that the current HPV vaccines are usually based on virus-like particles that are formed by the HPV surface components. So these virus-like particles are usually not infectious because they don't really have a DNA. They're not actually cells. But why is it that it's only because it acts like that, acts like a virus, because it closely resembles to the natural virus surface. So by doing that, the antibodies of the body can actually in future prove to be immune against it. So what these vaccines do, they do prevent other sexually transmitted diseases, but they can't work as a therapeutic vaccine. So this is something that I'm going to just brush over the topic, because from what I gathered, that they're still doing clinical trials on therapeutic HPV vaccines. So these are certain vaccines that I just mentioned in a brief way, because I still feel like even if we go dive into the therapeutic HPV vaccines, it's so much interesting, and there's just so much to, everything is so important in that you can't really miss anything. So this is just a brief touch that I gave. So these are the trials, the therapeutic HPV vaccines that are currently under trial. So the first type being the peptide-based vaccine. So I listed some advantages and disadvantages of this type. So the advantages are being that they're typically safe, and many people can tolerate that, with the additional benefit of being not as expensive and easier to be able to produce. The disadvantages of the peptide-based vaccines is that they often have to be combined with certain immunogenic adjuvants, and they also contain agonist epitopes, which can elicit a stronger immune response, which can be more to a potential disadvantage. So if we go on to the second type, which is another one that's currently under trial, that is a protein-based vaccine. So all of these protein-based vaccines are processed by antigen-presenting cells, which can present various antigens via the HLA class 1, class 2 for generation of the T cells, both CD8 and CD4. So the advantages are that they're also typically safe and tolerable, and including those people who have a very weak immune system or are immunocompromised. So a potential disadvantage of this vaccine, though, can be it can be poorly immunogenic for the generation of CD8 T cells, for the killer T cells, and therefore they may require, again, an adjuvant again to augment the efficacy in order to provide avoid a major histocompatibility complex to from processing the antibody-based immunity.